Great. All right, guys. I think we'll begin the webinar. So thank you all for joining today. We've got a pretty exciting topic that we want to run through, which is obviously DC solutions for both fleet and the public charging aspect. So today what you'll find is a lot of that for both fleet and public. There's a lot of common areas that we'll talk about, but then right at the end we'll discuss, in a bit more detail what the benefits are and what people predominantly focus on in regard to public charging, and then also the same thing for fleet. My name is Austin Devaney. I'm the National Sales Manager for EVSE Australia. I've been with the company for 2.5 years and have successfully rolled out a lot of EV charging projects across Australia and New Zealand. I'll hand it over to Blessing.
Yeah, guys, so I'm Blessing. I'm one of the Senior Business Development Managers at EVSE. So I joined the company early this year, but have experience in high voltage projects. And I work a lot with the New South Wales team doing commercial deployments, particularly with DC and AC. So kind of keen to present this with you guys.
Great. And if you have any questions, please just submit them in the chat box throughout, and we will get to them at the end. But today's presentation, it will be recorded and we will send it to you to your designated emails tomorrow. So it's all happening. We're recording it right now for you to look back on. All right. Okay, so look, just to recap, our mission and our vision at EVSE is to provide a means to electrify modern day transport. So we've been around since 2015. And since then, we've become a leader in providing turnkey EV charging solutions. So everything from initial site assessments to consultations to the supply and installation of hardware and software, as well as ongoing support. We see that full turnkey, like one-stop solution being incredibly important for a lot of customers, where they can just come directly to us and we can solve their problems.
Yeah, and I think a big thing as well is we're really focused on that sustainability piece. So as we've seen, we've had kind of record winters in terms of temperatures, so it's more and more important to invest in e-mobility, sustainability and renewable sources. And I think that's where we kind of hinge on, is supporting everyone in going to that path.
Exactly right. We care about it a lot, and that's why we do this. Awesome.
Cool. So Austin might introduce some of our corporate clients. As you can see over there, we do have a large portfolio and a large scale, but
yeah. So like we do work with a huge range of different partners from different industries across Australia. We've been around since 2015, and you can imagine back then people or organizations were a bit apprehensive around implementing even, one AC charging station. However, since then, we now have the experience, the expertise, the offices across Australia, as well as case studies to show our partners what the end result looks like, as well as just to essentially partner with them. So you may be looking at getting some one charging station. It could be AC infrastructure or DC now, but it's what does the future look like for your expansion, and how can we be involved to assist you with that?
Yeah, exactly. I think partnership's the main point when it comes to EV charging.
Yeah,
because you don't just get one. You obviously get one now, but 3 years down or 3 months down, you might need to expand. So it's about having a partner that can help grow, expand that business and support you along that transition.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is just a rough outline of the agenda that we will be discussing today. So the first step is kind of giving you guys a feel for what is DC charging and the differences between DC and AC charging. We'll also look at the types of DC chargers. So we have portables, we have wall mounted, we have floor mounted, and kind of where you'd choose one over the other and where those benefits are.
Right, and then key considerations, so what you need to plan for in effectively rolling out DC charging infrastructure, as well as for both public aspects or fleet, like what does that return on investment look like for you? So we'll run through all of that in the next hour or so.
Beautiful. So what is DC charging?
Yeah, so look, DC charging versus AC charging, there's considerable differences, right? You might be aware of AC. So AC is more of the slower type of charging. So it's either single phase or 3-phase, and it provides around that 6 to 10 hours for a full charge range, right? So you predominantly will implement AC charging in areas where your vehicles stay parked for extended periods of time. So, it could be your light passenger vehicles for, residential settings, or for commercial sites for pool vehicles that stay overnight, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the installation requirements, they're not as hefty as DC, so it allows you to implement a lot more AC charging stations at a single site. Right.
Beautiful. So when it comes to DC charging, we saw that AC is a bit more on that lower voltage, but DC is high voltage and current. So AC has around 32 amps. DC charge is looking at over 60 amps across 3 phases. So we have DC chargers that are 20 kilowatts all the way up to obviously 350 being offered on the market. We found the sweet spots around 90 because that's usually where onboard batteries can take it, or maybe around 100.
Yep.
But yeah, DC with that high power comes a rapid charging time. So you're looking at charges between 30 minutes to an hour, depending. Obviously, if it's a lower power DC, it might be a bit longer. If it's rapid, a lot shorter. But I think another key component mechanically is that DC chargers have inbuilt rectifiers. So that means that the power can just go directly to the battery as opposed to having to go through the vehicle's onboard system.
That's right. And that's predominantly why the DC units are a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
Because they have that onboard rectifier actually in the DC charging unit. And it's also why they're so big.
Yes, exactly. Right. Very, very big and heavy units. But yeah, so touching on that price point, so AC chargers, you can get an AC charger for less than $1,000. DCs, you're looking at 10,000 plus. So they are at a premium because of the internal components and hardware. Now, other things as well. So DCs are more suitable for those heavy vehicles and logistics operations. But we also have seen a lot of usage in fleets and public networks as well. So if you need a high turnaround for your passenger vehicles, or you want to have your own public accessible DC charger, you can have that there. In terms of installation requirements, because they require more power, they obviously require thicker cabling, larger circuit breakers. So there is a bit more on the installation side. And in terms of a revenue perspective, so AC public charging is mildly lucrative. So normally they're priced at around 30, 40, 50 cents per kilowatt hour. DC is what we're seeing is people are pricing them at a bit of a premium because they are rapid.
Yep.
And they actually can be very, very lucrative.
And that's important for understanding what your ROI is, which we'll delve into a bit deeper. But with DC, you can turn over a lot more vehicles in the same period of time compared to AC. And if you're charging at a higher rate, that means you can earn more revenue.
Yep. Beautiful. All right, so now we're going to go through the types of DC chargers.
Awesome. So this is the portable DC charger. So on the market right now, we're finding that a portable solution is becoming very important for some aspects of EV charging. So if that's sites that have power issues or sites that it's very difficult to implement more infrastructure, such as airports, you have to go through a lot of regulations.
Yeah.
Utilizing a portable charger, especially something like this that's rated at 20 kilowatts, that means you can use an existing outlet in the wall. So an existing 3-phase 32 amp outlet, essentially making this product plug and play.
Yeah. And look, these are the same outlets that you'll see in most industrial settings for equipments like scissor lifts or, forklifts or charging those things. So it's using existing infrastructure. I think some of the benefits that we have there is obviously it's kind of at that 20 kilowatt range. We have a 30 kilowatt option. And you want a portable charger that's highly mobile and compact. So obviously there's a lot of products on the market. Some are a bit heavier. And there's also products like this one here, which is around that 30 kilogram mark. So you can actually take it up, drive it to one site or another and use it across multiple sites. And a really big thing that Austin mentioned there is because you're using existing infrastructure, there's actually no installation cost. And when it comes to DC chargers, they have big cables and big circuit breakers. Installation costs can just balloon.
Yep.
So the DCs that are portable, they kind of hit that sweet spot.
Exactly. So the portable DC chargers you'll find, they come with 2 cables. So one goes into the wall to get the electricity and the other charges the truck or the bus or the vehicle. However, with this, you need to keep in mind that it's very difficult to do load management.
Yes.
Because with load management, you need to connect data cable to the charger, which is difficult in a sense with a portable DC because if you're connecting a physical cable to it, it's not going to make it portable.
Yeah, but I think a thing on that as well is that with the like the 20 kilowatt, they only use 32 amps across 3 phases. So it's actually the same amount of power draw as an AC 22 kilowatt charger, but you're getting a bit more of a rapid. So
Exactly.
that is another benefit of it. But we can move on to the others as well. So we have the wall mounted DCs.
Yep, absolutely. So these, the other option or the second option in terms of what DC chargers are and the types is wall mounted. So you'll find that there are different branded wall mounted chargers on the market, and they have different power ratings, which is great to be able to have a range to choose from. You would predominantly pick a DC wall mounted charger. One, if you have a wall nearby, because one, these units only weigh around 80 to 100 kilos compared to the freestanding units we'll talk about, which are nearly 400. Their installation costs are less because it's a lot easier to implement on the wall and just run cable to it, but also to save space in terms of parking bays, right? You're not taking up half a parking bay to put a freestanding unit. You can actually just wall mount this. It optimizes your bays. You can have 2 vehicles charge and then away you go.
Yeah. And I think what we found with especially DCs in general, but with the wall mounted, is the sweet spot is between around that 60 to 90 kilowatt range, because that's where you kind of get the most bang for your buck, and it usually meets with the vehicle's onboard requirements.
Yeah, yeah, we've found a lot of success with the 60 kilowatt, essentially because you're not having to upgrade power to sites because it fits within that requirement. So around 110 amps, 3-phase. So a lot of sites you might find if you go over that mark, it requires a power upgrade or will start tripping the circuits. So that's where this kind of fits quite well.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you need to make sure that all your DC chargers, they're fully OCPP, which means that they can have a smart software onboarded onto the charger to allow you to monitor, allow you to track, allow you to bill customers for the electricity.
Yeah, and another big thing about that as well is on top of those features, having software on a charge actually helps with remote diagnostics and servicing. So with a good software platform, you can actually look at the logs if there are any issues and troubleshoot that. So an offline charger, you can't really have that capability.
Yep, absolutely. And then there's the option of optional credit card readers. So we're seeing in the UK, for example, that the government has put out requirements to have credit card modules installed on every DC charger that operates over 50 kilowatts. So we're seeing that, and we're seeing kind of UK is really, 5 years ahead of us. It's like a crystal ball, essentially. So we want to be able to make sure that whatever DC chargers come to the market, they have the option of that credit card reader.
100%. And look, it makes sense. I mean, a lot of public assets, you have a credit card module there. So why would a DC charger be different?
Yep.
I think that's kind of going to be the standard as the time progresses.
And then it reduces, in terms of public, especially reduces users having to use multiple apps. They can essentially get out their card, tap, and pay for their session.
Exactly.
And then lastly, making sure that load management can be utilized on DC chargers is important. It's important for sites. Let's say you have a bus depot where you're going to be installing a lot of DC charging stations. So you need to make sure that in times of power availability issues, you have the ability to load manage those automatically down.
Yes.
Also, if you have a fleet, maybe you have one DC and multiple AC charging stations, it also works there as well. So different aspects, making sure that it's high tech and it's smart, can use load management is important.
Yeah, beautiful. Also, feel free to send through some questions in the chat and we will address them later.
I think some are coming through. Yeah,
lovely. Okay, now I guess final type of DC chargers are the big floor mounted DC. So this is very, very similar and will resemble kind of like the fuel bowsers, the fuel pumps. These are usually higher powered. So with the wall mounted DCs, I think they cap off around 60 kilowatts. When it comes to the floor mounted, you're looking at, 90 kilowatts to 350 kilowatts plus. So with these chargers, obviously they're higher powered, so they have extra rapid charging times. They're perfect for heavy vehicles and public networks. And also they tend to be fully OCPP, or that's what we would recommend you go for. I think because they are large though, they do have even greater installation requirements, and they're usually quite heavy units, around 400 kilograms. And they need, lifting equipment, so hoists and cranes.
Yeah, you're typically price-wise looking at freestanding units. It ranges from everything from $50,000 all the way up to 200,000. So there's a large range, and that's relative to the kilowatt charger you use. But there's a bunch of different brands, right? There's Tritiums, there's ABBs, there's Oculars, and so on. So the more EV uptake occurs in Australia, the more options in terms of range will appear. So making sure you pick the right product that works with your requirements in terms of technical as well as infrastructure will make a lot of sense, and will make your expansion and future progress a lot easier.
Exactly. All right, so now we're kind of looking at the key considerations for DC deployment. So what do you need to look at and what do you need to look for? All right, so the first thing is definitely site selection. So site selection is obviously really, really important, whether it's public or for fleet. And I guess that's one thing that we kind of help out with, is actually looking at the sites, seeing what's the best and which ones may not be suitable for EV charging. I think some key things you need to consider when it comes to site, especially when it comes to DC, is always going to be power. These things require a lot of power. So you want a site, if you are going to implement a very rapid charger, like a, 120 kilowatt, you need around at least 250 amps, 3-phase spare, right? So picking a site that has that. Or alternatively, if you have a site that you need to implement a DC charger for, it's like, okay, well, how about we do a portable that has around 20 kilowatts, so you only need 32 amps for. So determining what site is best for which charger is really, really important.
Yep. So essentially, with your sites, you want to make sure that they have available power.
Yep.
As well as the best site is where you can install a charging station that's close to the location of the switchboard.
100%.
We've done hundreds and hundreds of installations, and always the more cost effective is the site that has the 20-meter cable run compared to the site that has the 130-meter cable run.
Yeah.
Additionally, avoiding any civil works, so concrete cutting or trenching, because that will increase or inflate the price dramatically for installation.
Yeah, exactly. And even when it comes to power as well, even if there are limitations, that's also kind of where load management comes in. So if you only have one site that you need to electrify and it's obviously restricted, it's like, okay, how do we implement a solution that actually maximizes what you guys have and reduces the upfront costs? So that's where that engineering comes in.
That's right. So for all commercial sites, we recommend performing site assessments, as that will allow you guys to understand what you're dealing with, and can allow you to go, okay, this site's good, this site's bad. Okay, we can start with this one.
Yeah.
You'll also want to talk to your service provider so they can provide you engineering designs, proposals, wiring diagrams, and so on, so you can understand what it looks like now for your rollout, but what it looks like in the future.
Exactly.
And what Blessing was saying, like, obviously we work with a large range of customers, and what we found is a lot of the sites that we're working with have power availability issues.
100% most.
So with power issues, you can upgrade the infrastructure, which will cost a huge amount of money, but also it will extend the lead time of that project dramatically depending on what state you're in. For example, Western Australia, if you need to ask for more power to your site and then get it delivered, that takes around an 18-month period. So if there's a way to avoid that, we look to do that, and that's through load management.
All right, beautiful. So load management, I think there's obviously different types of load management. So we have the static that kind of limits the amount of power that's being drawn by the chargers as a hard limit. We also have dynamic or active load management, which does regulate it based on the actual amount of power being consumed, and also schedule-based management. But as an overall, load management really just helps us maximize the amount of power you have. And the most suitable for DC is realistically active load management. So active load management, a good module can actually read how much power is being used by the entire building and send a signal to the chargers so they can modify their draw accordingly.
Absolutely. And so the benefits, right, are that you prevent upgrades to your site.
Yes.
It allows for you to deploy more electric vehicle charging stations, where maybe you could only do 5 before, you can now do up to 15, right? So it adds to scalability and as well adds to future-proofing your sites. So there's a huge benefit with load management technology, which is why when you're picking a charging station, make sure that it has this functionality.
Yeah, 100%. And look, with our load management that we've developed as well, you need a system that is hardware agnostic, so you're not locked in. And you need something that's also tried and tested and is very, very suitable for multiple deployments, multiple sites, and is just efficient.
Absolutely. And we've tested and developed a OCPP load management technology in collaboration with the CSIRO. So that is essentially a software-based load management, and it can connect to any OCPP charging brand on the market. So if you have some chargers at a site, but you want to implement a different brand, you can load manage all of those.
Yeah. All right. So now the next step is obviously software. We've briefly touched on it earlier, but I think software is really a good way to actually have control and visibility over the charges and charging sessions. You're going to be paying a lot of money for a lovely piece of machinery, and you need to have a bit of control over it as well. So software helps with fleet charging optimization, public billing, interoperability, and also maintenance and support.
Absolutely. Especially for fleet managers, it gives you full visibility over the status and usage of those charging stations. So you need to understand what the downtime is, or like what the idle time is with your vehicles. And if your vehicles are operationally sensitive, you can look to minimize that downtime and get them back on the road. We work with car rental companies that are looking to electrify their fleets, and they care a lot. They care a lot about the amount of time that vehicle is parked doing nothing, because that's money that they're losing. So if they can look to optimize that by using data from a software platform, then that will improve their operations and save them quite a lot of money.
Yeah, 100%. And look, another thing as well with software is it allows you to actually see how many carbon tons you're actually saving. So by looking at reporting functions as well, you can say, okay, we're actually consuming this many kilowatts per hour. And this is how much carbon we're removing off the road. So when it comes to your reporting and actually showing how much of an impact you're having on the environment, it's really helpful to have software. Otherwise, you don't have that information.
Yes, especially if you need to hit your targets or you need something to compare against, that data is extremely useful. And then in terms of public charging, so public charging with a software platform gives you the power to set your own billing rates. So you can set it in energy-wise, so cents per kilowatt hour, or you can set it time-based as well. So if you want to incentivize people to move their vehicles after a certain period of time, you can bill them based on time.
Yeah.
So that's, $5 every 5 minutes, as well as 50 cents every kilowatt hour. So there's a lot of flexibility with that. And then you can highlight that charger on public maps. So for example, PlugShare, which is the largest EV charging public map in the world, that has all the public charging stations located on it. But also Google. So Google, you can now see EV charging stations located on them, and then the actual platform you use, so such as Explore, will highlight that to all drivers.
Exactly. All right, now the next obvious consideration is going to be future-proofed solutions. So I think what we mean here is you're going to be investing a lot of money into these DC chargers. It's a big investment on your part, and I think it's important to have someone who recognizes that and supports you along the way. So with these DC chargers, they get hammered, they get used at a high rate compared to AC chargers because they have a quicker turnaround. So you need a charger that is obviously reliable. It has a good uptime, and I think this is more and more important, especially in that fleet space as well, because if these chargers are fueling your passenger vehicles or your heavy vehicles, having a charger that's out of service can cost you a lot of money. So how do you get a provider? How do you get a charger that is reliable and secure? So that's a really big consideration there.
Absolutely. So when you're looking at a charging station, understand what does that support process look like. Now, if something goes down, which it might eventually over, the 2, 5, 10 years you have that charger, understanding what the steps are that are taken to resolve that issue. If there's a hardware fault, where are those spare parts kept, and how long does it take to get access to those to fix the unit?
Yeah. 100%. And look, even on the public side as well, it's like if you have a public charger that's non-operational, I think a good thing to understand is that a lot of these people who are doing road trips and whatnot, they're actually depending on these chargers to charge their vehicles. I know someone who's driving from New South Wales to Queensland, right? They went to a charger which was publicly meant to be working and it wasn't. And it's like, where do they go from there? So it's really important that to avoid the hate as well and negative messages on that reflect poorly on the business, you have a charger that's reliable.
Yeah, and you'll know pretty quickly if a public charging station is offline. EV drivers are pretty onto it in terms of notifying on PlugShare. that a charger is not working. So if the software doesn't notify you, which it does immediately, and you're not aware, someone else will.
100%.
So yeah, making sure, like Blessing said, public charging infrastructure, it can represent a poor image to yourself if something goes offline. So being very careful in who you pick and how understanding how that process for support is performed.
Yeah, exactly.
Critical.
And I think the way that this is done, and this is kind of what you'd want, is you'd want some sort of service level agreement. So
Yep.
Annual maintenance inspections, it's a big recommendation in AS3000. So making sure that those charges are being checked up on, making sure that there are also spare parts for the chargers. So a big thing which kind of links to sustainability as well is modular chargers, right? You don't want to buy a charger that's $90,000, one part goes wrong and you have to scrap the entire thing. That's not really sustainable.
Yep.
And it's not really what we're here for. So ensuring that you have a supplier with spare parts, modular chargers, it really helps with the life cycle of it.
And understanding the internals of the charger, what can go wrong, and then how easy it is to fix.
Yeah.
Right. Like, is it component based where you can take something out and replace it quite easily, or is it something more difficult like liquid cooled cables? If something goes wrong with those, how long does it take, and how much will it cost?
Yeah, and I think the other thing as well is Australian-based support. So obviously there are going to be a lot of players in the market, and it's very, very easy to sell a charger. That's what we've realized. But the hard thing is actually maintaining it. And I think a big advantage of Australia-based support and Australia-based parts as well, or stuff like that,
Yep.
is that we can actually support it. So
yeah, we in terms of EVSE, we seriously care about our partners and making sure those charges are online. That's a huge part of our business, is the support side, and we're able to provide that extremely well because of how well we know the products. Our expertise with people in different states, engineering teams, all locally based, allows us to go to site and quickly resolve issues if they occur. So we'll continue on. I believe it is now the case studies around our public and fleet charging, right? So understanding what that return on investment looks like in terms of money, or if it's in terms of something else.
Yeah, so here's just a map of PlugShare, which we have mentioned previously, but this is kind of just to give you guys a rough understanding of what the public DC network actually looks like across Australia. So obviously we work in the industry, so we know that there's a lot of chargers available, but for those who may be dabbling in it a bit, you may not be aware of just what it looks like. But currently there's over 300 DC fast charging stations available. And there's also going to be state and federal funding allocated for further 700 chargers over the next 5 years. So we're seeing a very, very big investment in public charging, which is also increasing the uptake there.
Yeah, and we recommend you to even log on to the PlugShare app. Have a look for yourself where all the public charging stations are, because it does highlight the AC chargers as well, the slow ones, but also these DC units. And it's great that we have companies like the NRMA that are working with the federal government in rolling out electric vehicle highways right across Australia. So they're implementing charging stations every 150 kilometres, which is a fantastic initiative.
100%.
Awesome. And then there's also funding opportunities becoming available, right? So New South Wales, for example, this state has invested in fast charging grants, allowing the likes of Tesla, NRMA, and other charging brands and companies to be able to input DC charging stations in regional areas where there wasn't any infrastructure previously. So it reduces anxiety around range and distance, and incentivizes and improves the uptake of electric vehicles.
Exactly. Now, our first case study is going to be a 120 kilowatt. So we've mentioned earlier that DC chargers can have a great return on investment, and I think this is a really good example. So this is a DC charger we installed in Canberra. It's got initial $88,000 upfront investment. So that's with the hardware and the installation. But what we're seeing is actually it's had a very, very strong return. So if you're looking at the column on the right there, there's some statistics, but to break it down, it averages around 201 sessions per month. it provides a sustainable revenue stream, which is actually sustainable as well. So obviously you're getting a good amount of cash flow, but you can also say that you're actually having a positive impact and decarbonizing society, which I think is the most important thing. In terms of long-term returns, it's projected around 36,600 annual revenue. So in terms of a payback period, you're seeing a very, very quick payback. And I guess, yeah, net profit per month is $2,000. So I think that's quite substantial.
That's right. And then we're able to gather all this data through a smart software platform. So it's vitally important to be able to have that, because then you can gather all the data down to the actual individual charging port to see who's using it, when they've started, when they've ended, and so on.
Yeah, and just touching on this one as well. So looking over there, what they're charging is 69 cents per kilowatt hour, which is kind of what we mentioned before. As DC, you can charge a bit of a premium on the power. And the average session duration is only 25 minutes, but you got to remember this is a 120 kilowatts. So 25 minutes, it's getting a lot of range and people are ready to go. So it helps with that turnover and it helps with that revenue.
Yeah, and the reasons why this has such a favorable revenue stream coming through it and a lot of activity is down to a couple of reasons, right? So location. This DC charger is based along a major highway in the ACT area. So that gives a lot of users the ability to quickly duck in and be able to charge. So location is important, as well as there was a lack of infrastructure in nearby areas. So this was the largest DC charger installed at the time in the ACT region. So obviously it got a lot of customers wanting to charge from it to get that rapid charge, and there was no infrastructure nearby. So it was taking all of those clients. And then obviously the 120 kilowatt factor, just having that such a high kilowatt charge is favorable to a lot of people who need to quickly stop by and then go.
100%, 100%. Okay, now we have another graph here, and this actually shows you, I guess, the path to profitability. So the red line there, it indicates the cost to the buyer. And in the initial upfront investment, obviously, the cost is going to outweigh the revenue. You're looking at 88,000 with something less than 50,000, right? But as we see it go to around year 3, that's when it begins to intersect and match. And then past that point, you're starting to see a lot of profitability. So I think the payback period around here is going to be less than 10 years.
Yep, exactly right. And the thing to consider is the total investment was 88,000. A large amount of that was the actual hardware. And so they were able to keep it within that $88,000 mark because they chose a location that fit well. It had power already to site, and as well, the location wasn't far from the switchboard.
Yeah.
So minimizing that in a public area, your ROI and your payback period shortens dramatically.
Yeah, and a key thing to add on to this as well is currently in Australia alone, we're kind of just breaking into the EV market as well. So the EV uptake, although it is obviously having a high trend upwards, we haven't seen the full effect of the EV market. So as time progresses over 5 years, 10 years, I wouldn't be surprised if you're seeing this optimization double or triple as there's more EVs on the market and on the roads.
And costs are lowered because it's more competitive.
Exactly. So this is kind of a bit of conservative estimate, but in saying that, I wouldn't be surprised if these figures get inflated.
All right. Okay, so we just talked about the public charging, and this is fleet, right? This is fleet related. So what we're looking at is work we've provided and performed with BevChain for their electric delivery trucks. They're Linfox trucks. They call it Green Fox because it's sustainable. But the setting was that they needed a DC charging station to rapidly charge their vehicles, right? That vehicle needed to stay for 1 hour. It needed to be packed, repacked with all the products and all the pallets within that 1 hour period of charging, and then it go out. So we were able to recommend a DC charging station that fit within that time requirement. And what we did was we went to site. We analyzed the boards. We analyzed the location. You can see here that it's actually implemented on a stand. So what we'll find and what you'll find is the wall box DC chargers, they're more cost effective compared to the freestanding units. So price was also budget for them was also a consideration. So we were able to minimize that with a wall box DC charger.
Yeah.
And then we implemented software on that charger. So one, they can understand the data and see how often it charges, its charging duration, how many sessions occur daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, but also in terms of the support side. So if that charging station goes offline, the software will let you know. If something's wrong with the charging station, the software will let you know. And will also let the software engineers that operate that platform to go, okay, something's wrong, let's fix it immediately. Lastly, they cared about ongoing service and ongoing support and maintenance. So they signed a service level agreement and maintenance agreement in place with us so we can look to maintain that yearly.
Yeah, and as you can see in that photo there, the gentleman there is pretty happy, so things are working out well. And I think that's the most important thing is long-term success and long-term results.
And partnerships. So this is just the beginning of their transition. We obviously want to work with them for the next 5 to 10 years. And so providing that ongoing support is seriously a crucial part of our business. That is everything for the webinar today. It's just a contact page here. So you've got my email address. I'll put Blessing's email address in the chat as well, but also just us general sales. So if you have any queries, please send this through to us. Otherwise, yeah.
All right, now we will go through some of the questions in the chat. We noticed they have been filling up as we've been having this webinar, so that's really, really good. Feel free to continue sending through some questions and we'll try to tackle as many as we can.
Okay.
But scroll up.
It's good. All right. Yep. So I think at the time, Catriona, I did mention that the portable DC charger does not, it doesn't work with load management, right? Because you can't really connect it with a data cable. So it's meant to be portable. You just need to make sure that if there's a 32 amp outlet there, it should be fine because it exists already in your site and you're not adding any more infrastructure, but always consult an electrician just in case.
Yeah, and one thing we have been doing as well is actually load logging studies. So if you are worried about power, we can do a load logging analysis where we actually monitor the amount of energy consumed in the building over a week. And based on that, we can obviously kind of tell you, okay, you have enough capacity for this or not.
Absolutely.
But it's 30, the 30 kilowatts is around 60 amps. So you're kind of looking out for that.
Yep. And Williams Warren, so does a DC 30 kilowatt charger charge quicker than a 30 kilowatt AC?
100%.
So yeah, in terms of AC, it only goes up to 22 kilowatts. But for example, a 30 kilowatt charging a passenger vehicle will provide 30 kilometers of range every 10 minutes.
And that's the DC one.
That's for DC. So that's 180 kilometers per hour. Whereas for an AC charger, that will give you around 50 to 60 kilometers of range per hour.
Yeah. And I think a key thing to, I guess, understand there is with the 30 kilowatt DC, you're getting 30 kilowatts DC directly. When it comes to an AC charger, even if you had a 100 kilowatt AC charger, the actual vehicles are usually limited to around 7 or 11 kilowatts. So let's say you did have a 30 kilowatt AC charger and you plug it into your car and you have a Tesla Model 3. You're only going to get 11 kilowatts AC as opposed to 30 kilowatts DC. So it will, even a 20 kilowatt DC charger will charge faster than a 22 kilowatt AC charger.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anthony, so how important is cable management in public DC charging? It makes the unit bulkier, but you don't have cables left all over the path. What's our recommendation? So that's exactly right. Cable management is very important for DC, but also AC charging, right? We only provide chargers that have cable management. So you have cable hooks on the side to wrap the charging cables around, or for the big DC units, they have swivels. So you can have the DC cables kept in an area where it's easy to use, but it's all tightly bound to the DC. Yeah, we find it's important, especially for councils. You can't have cables lying on footpaths.
It's a hazard, yeah.
Right, it's unacceptable. It also leaves the cables dirty. So having cable management is seriously important, and I don't think many companies think about that. For our preferred options, we work with a range. So you've got a huge range to choose from, and there's a bunch of different types of DC chargers that have different cable management systems. However, we prefer the Ocular brand. So if you want more information on that, we prefer them, one, for their cable management, but two, because they have such a large range that it gives our customers a lot of options to choose from.
Okay, beautiful. So Finn had the next question, which is a really good question. So if most EVs are capped at 100 kilowatts by the OBS, onboard battery charging system,
Yep.
why is there a need for a charger larger than 100 kilowatts? Look, really good question. And I think that's kind of what we tied into with, we found that the 60 kilowatt actually is that sweet spot. So a lot of providers do like going for very, very high powered DCs, like 300 kilowatts plus. But exactly like you mentioned there, if the vehicle's batteries are limited at around 100, you're not really getting any value for those additional kilowatts. I think the appeal for it is obviously having the ability to charge at
Yep.
those extremely high rates. As battery technology maybe develops over time, vehicles might be able to charge a bit faster. But I think in terms of value, around 60 kilowatts, 90 kilowatts is realistically maybe 120 as well, hits that sweet spot pretty well.
Yeah, and it's important to note that with DC chargers, say it's 120 kilowatt, if one vehicle plugs in, it gets the full 120 if it can take it. But if another vehicle arrives and plugs in, it halves. So it'll be 60 kilowatts to one vehicle and 60 to the other. So for that 120 kilowatt case study, that's a big advantage because it will be able to charge most vehicles up to its max DC. However, if another vehicle arrives, it can still charge both of those vehicles at a very high rate.
Yeah, beautiful. Anita had a great question as well. So do people tend to have a larger car park bay for EV chargers? If retrofitting, do the car park lines need to be redone wider? So not necessarily. And I think that's also another point with wall mounted DCs as well. And that's the beauty of those, is you can have it wall mounted and you don't need to actually modify the bays as well. So I think a major determinant as well is also the offset of the charger and the actual vehicle bumper. So realistically, if there's a good gap between the charger and where the vehicles will end up, you won't need to really adjust anything. It'll just be like, charge, like fueling up type of thing.
Yeah, and it's down to the location that you choose, right? Ideally, you'd want to choose a location where it's not going to take up any car bay space. You want to have it, behind in like a garden bed or on a wall, where it's not being obstructive, but also all the vehicles, they're all standard sizes. So in terms of parking, like there's no need to expand the lines. When it comes to trucks as well, the electric trucks that are arriving on the market are very similar sizes to the existing petrol vehicles. So there's no need to expand those space lines.
Yeah, exactly. I think the only consideration would be a very large floor mounted unit. So just figuring out where you're going to place it so you get that maximum return and it doesn't impede on potential parking.
Awesome. Chow Chen, does the software regulate the charging rate to obtain the best battery performance, or was it built into the charging station? Yep. So the car or the vehicle is the master, right? So the master in charging, where it tells the charger what to do. So for all DC chargers, from 0 to 10% of a vehicle's battery, it's very slow. However, from that 10 to 80% mark, that's when that vehicle receives a rapid charge. And then it slowly goes down to 0 but slowly decreases in charging speed when it hits 100, and that is to protect the battery's life.
Yes.
So the vehicles are the smart systems that monitor that battery health, they protect it, and they tell the charger exactly what to do.
Yeah. Really good question from Carlos. So this is more question on load management user services. So reducing charging costs by scheduling power delivery. And that is definitely something we do and we offer. So this is also provided through our software platform Exploring.
Yep.
So that's kind of that scheduled load control piece, but we can actually schedule it in specific times a day to have a reduced amount of amps that are actually offered, as well as a premium cost if it's a public setting.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's called scheduled load management.
Yeah.
So we can incentivize people to charge in off-peak hours as well, to not take too much electricity from your building, and then it costs less as well.
Yep. Beautiful.
Hi, Austin. How are the load? There's also site-based load management. I did this to balance across a single site with 9 chargers.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So site-based, we predominantly utilize site-based load management. It involves an actual physical hardware piece that goes next to the switchboard, and that's the main switchboard. So we'll connect that into the incoming mains of that board. It actively reads throughout the day the power availability, and then from that module, it connects out to all the chargers and communicates.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what your question was there. Chris, if you'd like to just, you could potentially
yeah, send us an
ask it
email
again.
or something
Yeah.
as well. Okay, so Anna has a good question. So you're located regionally 8 hours from a capital city. How challenging would it be to have access to support
Yeah.
locally? So I think one thing that we pride ourselves on is we service every corner of Australia. So we have installers obviously in the regional and metropolitan areas. So both of those areas can be serviced. And obviously it's depending on exactly where you are, but at the end of the day, we provide that for you.
Yeah, that's right. And we use local installers. So if you're going with any service provider, you want to make sure that the person who's installing that charger lives locally, because that means that they can go out to site quite quickly. You don't want to have to fly in an electrician or have an electrician that drives long periods of time to get there, because in terms of support, it's not as good.
Yeah. So look, that might be something where we can talk about it after the webinar and maybe see how we can support you in that regional area.
Yep. And Kat, so you need to upskill local electricians. So we are investing. So I'm working on a project to assist up and coming electricians that want to work with electric vehicle charging stations. So that's in the pipeline, but essentially it gives electricians the ability to understand what EV chargers are, understand how they're installed, as well as to ask the right questions with their customers. And that's everything from residential to commercial charging. So yeah, I'm working on that right now.
Yeah, beautiful. So what's the payback period? Is the 88,000 only for the standing units or included other costs? So that 88,000 that we mentioned there was actually including the units and installation and all those other costs as well. So I would have to actually look at the document, but we do have an actual brochure of DC revenue generation that we can actually send over to you that actually gives you the payback period and some more information. Obviously over there, we just had a bit of some excerpts from it just for the webinar, but we do have an actual more detailed breakdown.
Awesome. And on that, DCs have a much higher return on investment in terms of revenue than ACs, right? ACs we've found from our data, it's much smaller. You're not earning as much, which makes sense because for AC charging, the ROI is to actually bring people into the destination. Yes. It's destination charging. It brings them in, they stay for a couple of hours and invest in the community around them. Whereas DC is really about that rapid charge. They stay there for only 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
Yeah. So from Barry, how reliable is the process for flagging offline charges? I've heard anecdotal stories of charges in regional areas appearing available, but when the EV arrives, they're out of service. So that's a very common story. We hear it all the time, and we work to usually replace those charges, or and I think the issue is actually not necessarily the flagging. So a lot of those do get flagged, but the issue is actually the support afterwards. So it's very easy to say, hey, the charge is not working, but how do you go about fixing it? And I think that's a big thing that a lot of providers don't account for. Providing the charge and installing it is very, very easy. But then if something does go wrong, how are you actually planning on servicing that? Which is what we kind of touched on earlier, is having spare parts on hand, having local installers, and having an aftercare plan or annual maintenance plan as well. So I think it's a big challenge that is being found with certain systems, but that's something that we take very, very seriously, and we realize that no one wants to go to a charger, when they only have 50 kilometers of range left and it's out of service. I think that's just it's not ideal. So that's why we do have also a dedicated engineering team that actually rectifies these things immediately.
Yeah, and we try to keep everything in-house. So we try to have the hardware, have the software in-house so we can control it, which allows us to not be a middleman in terms of asking another provider for assistance. And that has proven to be super successful because we're a one-stop shop. If there's something wrong, you come to us.
Yeah, I think a really big thing is if you're not, or if you are the middleman, you're kind of waiting on an overseas big corporation to, get back to you, and it ends up being a bit of a fight there. So, and that's why things end up being left unattended, because no one wants to take accountability.
Yep. Great. Moving on from Grant, how does a EVSE charger integrate its data with my FMO? So all my charging is visible in our monthly reporting. Yep. So how you would do that is a couple of ways. The first way, we can API integrate through the software platform. So if you wanted to have your developers be able to do that, we can provide the API documents so you can pull that data. But our chargers are also Modbus enabled. So if you want to be able to connect via that way, we can just make sure that they have a data connection and then, yeah, be able to share the data through Modbus integration.
All right, from Anthony. So does net profit consider ongoing SIM software subscriptions and maintenance costs? So those calculations, I believe they do actually include those. And when it comes to SIM subscriptions, right, they're not actually large chunks. Annual maintenance inspections are pretty, cost effective considering the price of the unit as well. So I think the biggest return is maintaining it. But yeah, like I said, we can also send through that document with the actual ROI breakdown that might be a bit more value to you guys. So we might do that after the webinar.
Yeah, and it's good to keep in mind that was revenue. So obviously they're paying for electricity coming into their site. So I believe last month that site earned $7,000 in revenue. However, they've pretty much doubled the rate that they're charging to the customer. So it's around $3,500 in profit for that month. So then you can kind of extrapolate that out, and that's kind of how it works.
Okay, there's
yeah, so that's right. Yeah, Darren, thanks for that. So NRMA have recently come out saying that they're not going to have free charging anymore. There could be a number of reasons for that. However, what we're seeing is a lot of providers have previously upped their rate due to electricity costs being too high, but also they might have done that just for the increase in uptake of EVs is now at quite a large rate.
100%. Matt, so yes, we will be sending through a copy of the presentation and a recording of this webinar as well. Anthony, so do we build, own, and operate AC or DC chargers on public land? So currently, we don't necessarily own and operate, but we are looking at potentially partnering or developing a solution that may meet that requirement.
Yeah, so we have partners that would do that for us, whereas we don't predominantly provide that service from us. However, early next year, we're investigating the owning and operating model in a bit. We're fleshing out in a bit more detail for us as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, stay tuned on that model, because I understand a lot of councils, they're kind of looking at that model right now to see if it's feasible.
Yeah, so do you do signage to encourage best practice cable management? So cable management signage, not currently that I'm aware of, but obviously there are EV signage for actual EV allocations. And I mean, we can definitely look into developing something like that as well.
Yeah, it'd be good to know what your, I guess, issues are, Kat, or what questions you have. I'm not sure if it's from current experience or maybe you're just interested, but our chargers, they have cable holders on the side of their units, especially the freestanding chargers. So it makes sense, and it's quite easily invisible for someone to wrap it around there. That's why it's very important when choosing a product to make sure like those little things do make a difference, especially as the end result, you're looking at it and a cable flown on the ground just doesn't look good.
Exactly. Okay, so in terms of costing of AC versus DC, I think a DC charges around, I'd say around 10 times the cost of an AC charger. So you can kind of, get of an idea. So you may be looking at 1 DC as opposed to 10 ACs. So that's use that ratio as a bit of a guide.
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, this is it's all recorded. We'll send it all to you tomorrow. Our marketing team or myself will send it out to you guys. So you'll have a recording. You'll be able to look back on it.
Yeah, beautiful. And the last one was about fire safety. So we actually do have a fire safety document as well. With our DC chargers, they also do have an emergency stop. But we can also send some information out to that.
Yeah, and then we're working on fire safety and we're trying to be a leader within that for electric vehicles. Right now, there's a lot of grey area, and there's no requirements. There's hard recommendations, especially from bodies such as EV Fire Safe, that I would recommend you looking up. But essentially, if it's underground, that's where a lot of risk is for EV charging. So for the fire safety, what we do is, you implement a lot of signage to understand where the charging stations are located and where the exits are, but also master isolation switches where in an emergency you can click that and it shuts down all the chargers.
Yeah, but I think a big thing to, I guess, always remember is that these vehicles are very, very safe. So they wouldn't be on the roads if they weren't. There's a lot of government regulation regarding chargers and vehicles. And there is always that, I guess, hype or panic that does come with any news article, but in reality, there's been very, very limited cases of any actual issues, and it's realistically on par, if not less, than internal combustion engines.
Yeah, become very informed around it, because a lot of the media, or a lot of what's seen online, it turns out that the electric vehicles that catch on fire are actually modified externally. So they're not straight out of the factory. They've been touched up and amended. But obviously there is that safety aspect that you need to consider. So we are doing our best to address that.
Yep. But look, thank you guys so much for joining. It seems like we've ran through all the questions, and it's great from the feedback that a lot of you guys did find some value in this webinar. We do host webinars every now and then, so stay tuned on our EVSE marketing page, as well as maybe the inboxes as well for your emails. And we might be hosting another one very soon.
Great. Thank you all. Have a good day. Have a good afternoon. Cheers.